Hello everybody, I'm Zenith and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Mack and I talk about Disney products and Disney in general. So, how's it going, Kat?
It's going good in my apartment with you.
Yeah, you may notice that this podcast is a little bit different because, I am live with Kat right now.
Yep.
Last night we watched Bambi for the first time, and it is a crazy nostalgic movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, such a trip down memory lane. Both good and traumatic.
Yeah, I have to say Bambi does run the gamut from being, it starts off really sweet and really enchanting, and then it has these scenes where you're just like, oh crap, what the hell were you thinking, Walt Disney? In a good way. Mm-hmm. But it's a really fun movie. So let's start off with the characters this time around, as usual. What do you think of Bambi?
Bambi's adorable. Absolutely adorable.
Yeah, Bambi is like this character who is kind of meant to be. It's like a Dumbo character. It's the character that is just kind of getting used to the world. You first meet Bambi as Bambi is born. Mm-hmm. And so you see the world through his eyes. And you see him grow up. You see him as he's starting to learn everything around him. And that's how you get to know the character. And for a lot of it, he doesn't really talk. I mean, he does for a little bit. He's not like Dumbo where he's mute all the time. But a lot of this film is told through just sequences with music and just through silence.
Yeah, I think this movie has like a record for like the least amount of dialogue, at least in a Disney movie anyway. I think there's no more than 75 lines of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. I mean, other than Fantasia, of course, but that wasn't really meant to be a dialogue film.
True.
This is Bambi is based on A Life in the Woods. And so it's also based on another children's book, and yet what they wanted to really do with this is they wanted to keep the plot intact, but they wanted to embellish upon it, like show Bambi's life as life occurs, and so that a lot of that can be done without dialogue.
True. I mean, the imagery is just fantastic, and seeing how Bambi interacts with the other characters and with the scenery itself, it's really breathtaking. It's like you actually feel like you're looking at a deer as it's, exploring its home.
And as it's just like learning how to live. And I find that a lot of this movie is just about life. And yeah, they kind of took that from the title of the book, but a different director wouldn't have done the same thing. We spent a lot of time last night actually watching the special features on the DVD, and we saw that there's like a making of featurette where they showcase all the stuff that they said at the production meetings. And Disney talks a lot about how, okay, we could do it this way, but what if but that would be too much, He said, we don't need dialogue here. There were several points that they wanted to include either more appearances by man or the silhouette of man, and he said, we could just do this through the feel of the music. So it's crazy how much input Walt Disney put into this production.
Yeah, and especially because I know he originally wanted to do like a sort of live action type deer setting, like have the characters look more like the animals themselves. But it wasn't practical from an animation point of view, so they made him a bit cartoony, but they still remain true enough to the animal where you actually do feel like you're looking at the real thing, in the real setting.
And I have to say, going on another tangent, is that the animation in this is simply superb. I think I think it's kind of like a second Fantasia, where it's not as good as Fantasia, but it's kind of a different type of animation, where if you took Fantasia out of the equation completely, this would be the best Disney animation out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. it does feel like at times that I'm watching a clip from Fantasia, just the way that the music is and how certain themes go along with the actions of the characters. I mean, it really feels that way. Mm-hmm. And one thing to note is that none of the characters sing in this. It's all complete, background vocals, background music.
And a lot of the tunes in this film are not even like full songs. They're just actually like themes. They're simple tunes, and that work all together to create this atmosphere that the animation is trying to convey.
Yeah, it's like some of the characters even have their own themes. Like Bambi has a theme, particularly when he's frolicking. Thumper has a theme.
Man has a theme. Yes, man. The scourge of the century.
Yes. So, getting to the characters, we have Bambi, the star of the show, and basically everything is told through, from his point of view. And Bambi, you see, starts off as, wide-eyed innocent, learning everything. Like, he learns how to walk, he learns how to talk, he first experiences walking through the woods, and then walking to the meadow, meeting a girl for the first time. So you see a lot of pretty much all of his first experiences that he goes through, and it's really fun to see how he reacts to these, because sometimes he gets really excited, sometimes he gets scared, and it's kind of like just watching a child experience their first time for anything.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very moving, I would say, to see how, all of his first experiences, and you get to feel like, you've been through some of this stuff before as a child, but you probably don't remember it. And seeing it from someone else's point of view, from like the outside in, it's very different. It's very entrancing in a way, and seeing how life works. And then after you get all his first experiences, you get to see him. You get to see him go through hardship. You get to see him go through the seasons and discover. And you also get to see him as a grown-up man.
Oh dear.
Well, dear man. He's Puma Man.
Yes. Yeah, and by the time he's an adult, he's learned about life by this point, and he's become a well-established adult. And then you see how strong of a character he's become, and how it helps him out through hard times later on.
Yeah, you get to see just how much he's learned from growing up and from the experiences he's had, and that's colored pretty much the person he has grown into. And throughout the second half of the film, really, is where you get to see him as the adult and how he kind of deals with the stuff around him. You get to see him fall in love, and you get to see him see the horrors of man even further as it burns down the forest, and then gets out alive, and you see that the forest renews itself and that life still goes on. And it's very much a talk about how the seasons still continue, animal life still continue, even though men is portrayed as evil in this film. Their effect is only temporary.
Exactly, like they show men, taking life, taking a home, pretty much, causing destruction, because, that's what man does.
Yes, man, the killer of everyone.
But despite all of man's, negative influences on nature still, still comes back. There's always going to be, life and rebirth and continuation. And this movie pretty much just shows that. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is shown because of the way the seasons work in this film, where you see, okay, well, spring, everything's good again, and then we slowly get to autumn and winter, and things are starting to get harsh. And yet spring still comes. Spring always comes, and there's new life and there's new love in the air. And so in the same way, even if man or some other predator comes into this world, we can bounce back, we can survive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Bambi shows all that just perfectly.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, like I said, without dialogue, a lot of it is just like self-discovery and just observing things, just observing the way the world works, observing life.
Yep.
And then we have do you want to go through the secondary characters first or the other main cast?
I guess we can go through the main cast.
Mm-hmm. So the other main character for most of the film is Bambi's mother. Bambi's mom!
No! Bambi's mom, the first parent and first ever Disney character to actually get offed in a Disney film.
And they said in the production meeting, this is the first time we're killing a Disney character. This is pretty heavy. Mm-hmm. And I want to start a Disney death count right now. This is going to go throughout all our videos. So right now, Disney death count, 1 for Bambi's mom.
Yes.
Ding!
So, Bambi's mom, for the most part, she's the typical, nice, sweet mother, that all of us, either grew up with or wanted to grow up with. She's very soft-spoken, she's very protective. She can be a little fun, and she teaches Bambi everything that he needs to know. So she's basically, the typical good parent.
Mm-hmm. And she's very understated in the film. Like, her presence is there for most of the film, but she's not, she's not too protectorate. She's just the right blend of, okay, I need to let my child grow up. I need to let him be. But at the same time, she teaches her child. She's there to help Bambi grow and help him become a better person.
Yeah, and even though that, she isn't there for a lot of scenes where he, discovers new things and experiences them, she still has her presence known afterwards. She's always there to, explain things that he doesn't know. And you actually get attached enough to her where it does become generally upsetting when you see her die.
Especially because when the first time man appears and you see Bambi's father stop and everyone's running around and running away from man, the first thing she thinks about is, Bambi, where's Bambi? She doesn't think of the others in the herd. She doesn't think of her husband, who we'll talk about in a bit. But no, the first thing she thinks about is her child. Because, she's probably always thinking about it, but if she didn't let him go on his own, he wouldn't learn anything. He wouldn't grow up.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's very, very sad when she died. And actually, when I first watched this when I was little, my conception of death at the time was that when people died, they disappeared. Because whenever, I had a relative pass away, I never saw them again. Or when I had a pet die, they would vanish. So that was always my conception that, Bambi's mom just disappeared.
And that's the thing, during the production meetings, they were saying how, okay, well, they were going to show, Bambi's mom slump over and show her body and stuff like that. But it's no, we don't even need that. We'll just have the shot. We'll have Bambi's mom disappear. And then we'll have Bambi run through the thicket, and his struggle just to find his mom again, and then he learns from his father that his mother isn't coming back. That's a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, and definitely not as traumatic as if they showed her body.
Yeah.
Because that would have been taking it a bit far, in my opinion.
Well, it depends, because during The Lion King, they actually do show Simba's father's body.
Yeah, but that was, much later on, and it was to a generation that was, less desensitized to that type of thing.
Also, I mean, this was made during the war, and I think it's better to not show death at that time because, people are supposed to be uplifted and whatnot, and what happens in Bambi's life is supposed to be uplifting at certain points,
Mm-hmm. So, next on our list...
let's talk about Thumper.
Yes, Thumper. I guess you can call him the comic relief of the movie.
Yep. He's very much the little kid, whereas, Bambi's kind of the newborn kid. Thumper is kind of the terrible 2-year-old who's always, he's always trying to wheedle himself out of trouble. He's always, trying to show off. And I think he's really cute.
He is adorable with his big puffy cheeks.
But he is a rascal. He talks about Bambi before he even when he's just born. He's like, "You look funny" or something like that.
Yeah.
He's acting kind of funny, but he's a newborn baby, and so Thumper is kind of the person who's just the rascally kid.
He's the type who doesn't think before he speaks. So just sometimes when he talks, it's a bit insulting. Like when he talks about like Bambi and how how wobbly he is, and how funny he looks at times. And then his mother has to come in and correct him. And a lot of the lessons that he's learned is from his father, which he always quotes.
And then when he was trying to eat the good flowers, his mom came in and is like, no, remember what we taught. Always eat your leafy greens. So, I think you can go two ways with Thumper. I think you can he's one of those characters where you either love him, he's adorable and cute little kid, or if you don't really like that type of personality, you can be like, okay, well, but at least he's not a main character. He's like a person that you can either get behind for while he's in the film, or you can just be like, okay, on to the next character. But I think the good thing about Bambi is that there are so many characters that you can see that are like real life people, in a sense.
Yeah, he definitely does have that personality about him, as a person would act. Because, he's wide-eyed and curious, he's excitable, he's obnoxious, he can be a show-off.
He's cute.
But he's still very endearing.
I like Thumper a lot. I think he's one of the driving forces of the film in terms of, like, memorable scenes. Like, the moment he jumps out onto the frozen lake, and he's like, "Look what I can do," and it's one of those scenes that I remember very clearly from my childhood because I watched this a lot as a kid. This is the only film from the 40s that I watched so much that I remember it today. So I'm a big fan of Thumper, and I'm a big fan of the character of Bambi. What do you think?
I like Thumper. I always thought he was cute, and of course, he kind of represents, the lighthearted scenes, since he is, both the comic relief and the cutesy character that the kids, can really, love. And, that's pretty much his symbol right there. He's, like, the bright spots in Bambi's life amidst all the other dark moments.
So much darkness. It's like Kingdom Hearts, only more dark.
Silly.
And, next we have Flower the skunk. So this is kind of an interesting character choice where we have this skunk that Bambi meets in the middle of the forest amidst the thicket of flowers, and he immediately says flower because he's surrounded by flowers, and the name sticks, and so they befriend a skunk, someone you wouldn't necessarily think he would befriend.
Yeah, and Flower, he's very, he's very bashful, kind of shy, but he's wide-eyed innocent. But other than that, there's really not much personality about him. And I know this sounds bad, but when me and my friend were watching this, we were kind of ragging on Flower a bit for being a bit fruity.
he is a bit effeminate. Yeah. And I mean, he does end up at the end of the film getting with another skunk
that we think is female, but then again, he looks female, so it might just be another androgynous skunk.
You know what? We'll go with Disney and say, okay, they're female, but they did make him a bit effeminate, not to the point of gay dragon status. No, this is fine. It's a little bit jokingly. It's nothing even stereotypical. He's just kind of shy. He's just kind of he plays with his tail a lot.
Yeah, I think it's evident though that he has a crush on Bambi. Because think about it, he probably did have a name before Bambi first called him Flower, but after hearing that, he's thinking, oh, you can call me Flower if you want to. I don't mind. And then Bambi's like, pretty flower. And he just blushes and, gushes. And then later on, he shows up. He sees Bambi again as an adult. And again, he gushes. Because he calls him by his name Flower again. He's like, oh, he's still remembered. And then at the end, when he has a kid, he actually names him Bambi. After his first love.
Who knows? A skunk and a deer could love each other. It could happen.
It's possible. I gotta say though, like aside from being, the cutesy character and being like one of his friends, Flower really doesn't have much purpose in this movie.
He's actually he's more a tertiary character when you think about it, because we have Bambi's throughout most of the film, Bambi's mother's throughout most of the film. Thumper's there through quite a few scenes, especially helping Bambi grow. But Flower is only in 2 scenes that I can think of. One when he's a child, and one when he's adult.
Yeah. Well, there's one brief scene where they show him hibernating, but that's just to show him hibernate. And really, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't teach Bambi anything. They don't really show their friendship or show it developing with Thumper. So, really, I think he was just thrown in because let's have a skunk, a really cute skunk in there, but let's give him a hippie name. I know, an ironic name. Let's name him Flower.
And it's also a scene to show that Thumper is also still a rascal. He was waking Flower up during hibernation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dude, if I were Flower, I would have been so pissed off.
I was this morning, 5 more minutes, Mom. I don't want to go to school today. I just want to stay home and bake cookies with you. If you got that reference, then you have the same childhood that I have.
I get it.
You also get a cookie if you understand that. But yeah, so those are pretty much the main cast of characters for most of the film. And a lot of it is just okay, these characters don't always appear at the same time, but Bambi is always there, and also his mother is, for the most part, always there. And those are the 2 main tenets of this film, is the relationship between Bambi and his mother. And Bambi's friends really help him learn and grow, but his mother is really what helps him develop. Mm-hmm. And but another character that we have to talk about is Mr. Owl.
Mr. Owl.
How many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop?
True. Well, I think he's actually called Friend Owl in this one, I guess, just to distinguish him from that.
But he does look like it, doesn't he?
He does.
And in fact, he's actually the first character we see.
Yes, he pretty much is, sort of the old timer who's been around the bend a couple times. He's seen everything that goes on, and he pretty much shows up just for other characters to annoy him.
Although when we first see him, he's settling into his little nook in the tree, and he's all cute and stuff. He looks like a very happy owl. But then again, that's when Bambi's younger. You can imagine after the years go by, and after he's seen a few more winters, he's grown into this old prude.
Yeah. Well, he hates the concept of Twitter painting season.
Also known as horny season.
Yes. It's a season where all the animals get it on.
On screen too. They're all twittering around and kissing each other behind their wings, and
and lots of other unmentionable stuff. Giggity. And he's all every season I gotta put up with this crap.
It's all these people frolicking. And then he gives his whole entire speech where he's walking around, his head's turning around like an owl. and you get this, he has this speech where he's talking about everything that happens when you fall in love during spring. And so Bambi and the rest of them say, that's not gonna happen to us. Next thing you know, all 3 of them fall in love, one by one.
Damn women and their feminine charms.
Grumpy was right.
Yes. Yeah, those females, man. What did he call them?
Those wicked wiles.
Yes, those wicked wiles.
And I just love that speech that the owl makes, because during the whole thing, he does these incredibly physically impossible things. And at one point, he jumps into the air and he walks in the air. Like, he's not flapping his wings or anything. He's just walking in the air. And he does loop-de-loops on a branch of a tree.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air.
Never thought I would feel so free.
There you go. You got a taste of our singing abilities. So, yeah, that was Owl. Who's the next character we should talk about?
The other character, there's only really 2 or 3 more. We have Faline.
Yes, Faline, the love interest.
Who, when she's a child, she's cruel. She goes around, she steals kisses from Bambi. She pushes him in the water.
I wouldn't call her cruel. I'd call her more eccentric, like a kid who ate a lot of sugar. And
she's high on crack.
Yeah, because Faline obviously is the love interest because, she's the only other deer child, and of course she's a woman. Mm-hmm. And she's a lot more, socially adept than Bambi is because she immediately tries to socialize with him, but he's way too shy and taken back by her eccentric personality to really, interact with her. And it's not until they start chasing each other that he gets more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, she's actually the female love interest that is shown the most throughout the film, because when Bambi's a child, she's foreshadowed. Like, they have the little scene when they meet together in the meadow, and she's all frolicking and licking him. And then later on in the film, where we just meet the random skunk love interest and the bunny love interest out of nowhere, Faline comes in, and we're like, okay, she's the female from before.
Mm-hmm. And she unfortunately loses all that eccentricity and becomes just,
She kind of becomes a fill for Bambi's mother at this point, because Bambi's mother has been dead and gone for a while, mm-hmm. and so he sees this girl that he hasn't seen for a long time.
And he reacts pretty much the same way.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't call it an Oedipus complex, but I would say that his mother's death had something of an effect upon him, and seeing Faline was a little bit like seeing his mother again.
I guess you can see it that way, because she is similar to her in personality, in that, ranges from being just nice to meh.
Yeah, she doesn't really have a presence. She's like, okay, we're gonna frolic around and I'm here, but she doesn't have many lines in the film, and for the most part, she's there just to be the love interest.
Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, back in the 40s when this movie first premiered, they actually tried to market it as a love story, which would explain some of the songs, because...
Love is a Song is one of the song titles?
Yeah, it's the first song and the theme for it, but it doesn't fit because it's a movie about the life of a deer. They don't get to the love stuff till the second half. And even then, they don't really explore it too well. Yeah,
it's not really a love story. Like I said, it's a story about life and how life works. And love is only a small portion of life.
Exactly. So, Faline's an okay character. And I guess you can call this, the first real official Disney couple. Because personally, I don't count Snow White and the Prince at all. I refuse to count them.
And this is technically the first unofficial Disney prince, where we have, instead of this unnamed prince, we have Bambi, who's actually, he's considered a prince in the fact that, he's introduced as Prince Bambi, but you don't think of him in Disney canon.
True, because his father is known as the Great Prince of the Forest, for whatever reason. I didn't know animals had monarchies. But that's what he's called, and because Bambi's his son, he's known as the Young Prince. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's the same thing with the term princess. Even though your parent is dead, you still go by the name princess, or in this case, prince.
Damn princess syndrome. And so I guess the next character we have to talk about is the next character we have to talk about is Bambi's father, because, well, he is probably the most minor character in this film, besides the other character we're going to talk about next. He's still there for a large portion, and the thing I like about him is that he's always so majestic. When Bambi is born, he's you see the camera pans to him, and he's standing on the hilltop looking down at Bambi. And you get the feeling that this is someone who's very high status, who's very high class. Mm-hmm. And so, even though he isn't around in Bambi's life a lot, when he does come to Bambi after his mother dies, you still get this regal appearance of him, and he's just like, your mother won't be with us any longer, but I will oversee your development, you know? And I guess we should talk about his father status. You were talking to me earlier about how you don't think he's the best father figure.
Well, here's the thing. In a lot of situations with animals, a lot of the time it is the mother who only cares for the young while, the father does his business and then leaves. Mm-hmm. So, personally, I think the way that Bambi's father acts is sort of how I guess Mufasa should have acted in real life. Because, because the lion, the head of the pride, he does whatever he wants with the females, and then the females do all the work, and then they raise the young. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much the same with the deer. Mm-hmm. But however, in Lion King, you actually see the father, interacting with his son and teaching him stuff, whereas it's the complete opposite with Bambi and his father. Because Bambi doesn't meet him until he's not a baby. Not, I guess a child, like
he's about a year old.
About a developed child, and it's the first time he ever goes to the meadow. And even then, his father doesn't even speak to him, but he does acknowledge him, which gives you the feeling, obviously he knows who Bambi is. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he does know the connection that they share.
And I like how Disney, they studied these animals beforehand, so they probably knew how animals acted, but they were like, I'm guessing what they were thinking was, we want to set a good example for how people should act, because, a couple of their previous films had moral influence, were about morals, and so I think what they wanted to do here was show that this father was always watching him and always, observing his development, but he had other things that he needed to do as the great prince. And so when his mother died, he saw that, okay, it's my turn to step in. I need to oversee the development, even though in real life animals wouldn't be like that.
And that's also the first time he actually talks. Mm-hmm. It was after the mother dies, and the first thing he says is, your mother cannot be with you anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's basically his way of telling him, your mother's dead. You're on your own now. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, I guess it's implied that his father raised him, but you really don't see them together, him growing up or anything. You don't actually see the prince again after that until
the very end of the film.
Yeah, near the end of the film, when man has infiltrated the forest and the fire starts. That's when he goes to his son, who has been shot, and goes to help him out and out of the forest. Mm-hmm.
And so, the thing I like about his interaction with Bambi as an adult, and when he leaves, is you get the feeling like, okay, I'm going to set an example for my son. I'm going to be this majestic person, and so my son is going to grow up to be like this. And then when he sees his son in the forest, he's been shot, and he doesn't help him up that much. He says, you got to get up. You're better than this, kind of thing. And so Bambi does get up. And then he helps him. He nudges him along, and he helps him get out of the forest when it's burning. And so it's kind of like a mixture of father and son relationship and mentor and student relationship between them.
And then at the very end, the last scene, after Faline has given birth to twins, you see Bambi standing up on the cliffside with his father. And you see them both standing there, both where his father stood before when he was born. They both look at each other, and then the great prince just walks away, leaving Bambi there, basically establishing that he is the new great prince of the forest. Mm-hmm.
Of course, we interpreted the scene, bitch, I'm going home. You're on your own.
Yeah. He's like, Dad, no offense, but fuck off. This is my house now.
But yeah, I have to say that I really enjoyed Bambi's father. He was very, very understated. He wasn't there for much of the film.
He was still a commanding presence, though.
Yes, every scene he was in had meaning and had purpose behind it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the last character, sort of character we can talk about is the villain of the film, which is Man.
Yes, man. And Man really is probably the least appearing thing in the film. Man appears 3 times, and most of it is indirect. First of all, Man appears through music. Man has this theme song, and so whenever that theme plays, Man is around.
It's kind of like if Darth Vader, you never saw his face, but you always heard that theme song every time he arrived somewhere.
Breathing.
So it would be like that, it's true you wouldn't get the visual, but it'd still be just as impactful and still as scary.
And so, we see Man, we see the presence around, we see the theme, and then we start hearing gunshots. And the first time, nothing bad happens. But the second time Man appears, like halfway through the film, Bambi's mom dies.
Yes.
And so we get to see what Man is capable of. The first time it's just like a threat, but then it's just like, okay, they've done something real. The third time Man appears, Man does 2 things. First of all, they kill off. We're gonna put the kill count to 4 by now because we officially see 2 characters die. We see Bambi's mom die, and we see this pheasant die when she flies off into the distance. But as the gunshots continue, we see a lot more feathers. So
I guess based on what I've seen, because they did show Man, firing a whole bunch of times, and the animals like frantically trying to run away from him. But the only thing that I saw was a puff of feathers go up like twice, indicating that one of the birds did get shot, and I saw that twice, so that means 3 birds died in this attack.
So yeah, Man killed 4 birds officially.
3 birds.
Well,
3 birds and a deer.
3 birds and a deer. So 4 Disney deaths
in one movie. Ding. Ding, ding, ding.
This is a very big thing for Disney at this point. It's very like the darkest they've been at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think it does showcase a lot of things about life. Is like death is just a part of life. And while Man is vilified in this film, especially because later on their campfire starts a gigantic forest fire, it does show that, life can rebuild itself. Mm-hmm. Even death, even though people die, even though death happens, it is only one part of a cycle in the great circle of life.
True. I gotta say, that fire spread really quick.
That fire was like a demon. Like, it was just... First of all, the flame effects and animation are superb. Mm-hmm. It was just well done. And as they're going through the forest, it's like it's following them like a demon. It's everywhere. Like, everywhere they run, it's like going wicked fast. It must have been like the dry season or something. And so they have to run through the river, and yet there are trees falling down through the river, and so they have to jump into the jump off a cliff and into the ocean, and it's a very amazing end scene.
Yeah, very intense. So and there was actually a scene that they were gonna add in the aftermath of the fire. They were actually gonna show the charred body of Man, like just like his foot or a hand with a gun. But I guess they felt that would have been a little too much, especially considering how many characters they killed off already. Not to mention that, it would have, lessened the presence of Man. Yeah,
they wanted to really make Man more of a threat. Like, the fear of the unknown is much better than fear of something we can see and identify. We see signs of Man throughout this film, but we never actually get to see Man.
Yeah. And another thing that we see from Man is the pack of wild dogs. Mm-hmm. That's like the closest thing we see to Man interacting with actually, with actually trying to capture the animals and kill them. Because you see, like, this pack of really ferocious-looking dogs.
Demon dogs, jeez.
Yeah, that get unleashed and try to hunt down Faline, and they actually corner her on a cliffside, and you actually think that they are gonna generally kill her. Then Bambi comes in and
kicks all their asses.
Yeah, but even then, they still managed to overwhelm him, and I'm surprised he wasn't more bloodied up when he finally got them off of him.
Yeah, and another thing I like to note that there's another scene where Bambi fights off another deer early on in the film. And there are many times in this film where the animation is simply superb, but this scene does it is the best in the film, where you have everything turns a stylized color. Like, it becomes like this clash between, like, you can't tell which one is Bambi and which one is the other deer because the way they do the colors, but you can see the mood and tension of the scene, and you're just wondering, like, is Bambi the one winning? Is he dying? Like, what's happening? And it gives this, like, sort of threat and tension to every single blow that that the deer are throwing with their horns, and it is simply superb.
I used to be afraid of that scene because it was drawn so intensely, and I didn't know, if Bambi was winning or losing, or if he was, like, seriously being hurt or not, but it was always hard for me to watch because I didn't want to see Bambi get hurt.
There's also another scene that we have to talk about, and we've discovered that in pretty much every Disney film up until this point, there is an acid trip scene. It happened in Snow White during the forest scene. In Pinocchio during the Isle of Little Boys. I'm just gonna call that the transformation donkey scene. That's an acid trip. Fantasia itself was an acid trip. And Reluctant Dragon, just shut up. That wasn't a film.
And Dumbo, the pink elephants, obviously.
Yeah. So, and then in this film, we have a scene where Bambi is in love, and everything turns into white fluffy clouds for a second, and he's like jumping around clouds until this deer appears. Like these two scenes are juxtaposed, where first we have the acid trip scene where he's jumping on the clouds, and then we transition to the fight with the deer where everything's so intense. And I just have to say, what they did with this animation is simply awesome, especially because this has been in development for such a long time. Mm-hmm. This was the film that Disney wanted to have as their second film, but it was delayed and delayed. Right.
I think it was in development process for about 6 years,
mm-hmm.
which is a pretty long time.
Especially back then. Mm-hmm. And it costs a lot. I don't think they turned as much of a profit as they could back then. I know a lot of people did go to see it, but at that time the war was still going strong, and I mean Dumbo was an unprecedented success. It was a miracle at that time to get that much money back from a film, mm-hmm. and this one, I know a lot of people went to it, but I don't know, how much they could have made off of a film like this,
Right.
Which is a shame because I think this is the best film of the 40s that they made.
Definitely. And it's been true. It is kind of, dreary in terms of its content. So I guess maybe that's why people weren't as fond of it as they are now. But it's still a very well done film. And I'm pretty sure there are some people who saw it back in the day that did think so.
And after it was re-released, I'm sure it did a lot better because they Disney films tend to be re-released every 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And especially with films like Dumbo, which was like a flagship thing and stuff like that, they keep getting re-released, and that way the new public can just judge the film. And for the most part, a lot of these Disney films that were re-released, the public were saying, "Okay, this was a great film back then. I don't know why it didn't do as good as it could have," Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, what do you think overall the characters of this film?
I like the characters overall. There's none that, annoy me. There's none that, I think were completely pointless in having. And I think that they all show, basically what the movie's trying to tell is life. You see each of them as they interact with mm-hmm. Bambi and how their lives change in the process as well, and how they deal with the changing seasons and everything. So, yeah, I really do like the characters, and I mean, they are memorable. Everyone remembers Bambi. Everyone remembers Thumper and Flower. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Bambi's mom.
Tweet.
I can never watch that transition scene now without thinking of Critic. Damn you, Critic.
I will say this, though. I think while the actors were well picked and did act their part, there was a disconnect between the actors and the characters, I think.
Yeah, in terms of voices, I think they could have done better. Because as opposed to today where you have characters and then voice actors, changing their voices a bit just to sort of mesh with the character. In this case, you just have people sounding like people and talking, and those voices are just put to animals. And it doesn't really sound right.
Yeah, like Mr. Owl has kind of a different voice to him.
But it works.
Yeah, it does work. Thumper was voiced by a 6-year-old, and I thought he captured, being a child really well because he was a child. But at the same time, you could definitely tell there were certain times where he paused in the studio, and I'm just like, yeah, you can edit that.
Because here's the thing with the child, like, true, it's good that they have an authentic child, voicing a child. But then again, this is a child. He's not professional. And on top of that, he could barely read. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time, he had to have adults pretty much feeding him his lines. And even then, because, again, he's only 6 years old, he couldn't remember them like a professional would. So a lot of the time, you could hear him, pausing, trying to remember his lines. And it sounds kind of awkward at times.
Especially because you think, like, during a pause, you can definitely cut that. I don't know what their audio editing software was back then, but even now, like, I can find ways to edit around a lot of those pauses and just cut them out completely and make things flow much better. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think their choice of actors was okay for the time, but there was somewhat a disconnect between the actors and their characters.
Right.
But yeah, so those are the characters. Now let's talk about the music. And this is kind of something different for this film because in the past we've had actual, like, flagship type songs. Bambi doesn't really have that. The music kind of feels like just another character, really. Where they have a lot of these song segments, and they're just meant to enhance the film. It's difficult to describe, but the movie begins with "Love Is a Song," which is the only really song that I can think of that is meant to really be sung by a chorus kind of group. It's not meant to be an orchestral piece. It's an actual song.
And it kind of doesn't feel right. I guess they added that in because, again, they were marketing it as a love story. But because I really don't think it sets the tone for the movie that well.
No.
And on top of that, it's sung by this lead person that I can't tell if it's a man or a woman.
Yeah, it's one of those voices that you had back in the 40s where it's just like, I don't know what this is. They had some very unique singing tenants in the 40s.
Yeah. It could also be the microphone, because you know how when people would sing on radio back in the day, their voices would be a little distorted?
Yeah, that's true. The audio equipment was not the best back in those days.
But it still sounded weird. I mean, I still remember it. I still remember the song because they play both at the beginning and at the end. But it's just kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the first song, Love Is a Song, is not something I would call the best in Disney canon. I wouldn't even put it up to Snow White standards. I think it's just kind of bleh. I don't think they should have started off with that sort of song. Mm-hmm. But the next one we have is actually so much better, is that we have Little April Shower. And this is the only other piece that I can... Well, there's only 2 other songs in the film that actually have vocals. But even though you have, like, people singing in the background, it's not meant to be, like, a song that people sing. It's just kind of setting the mood. We have this song where it starts off with a bunch of raindrops falling piece by piece. Like, you have drop, drop, and each drop makes a sound that an instrument would make. And it starts off into this actual, like, shower, and we get this song where it's just like, okay, it's setting the tone for... These characters are getting out of the way for the rain. They're trying to get dry. And so it's both good and bad at the same time. The scene is meant to be both sad and entrancing in a way.
Yeah. It seems like it seems more like a number that they cut out of Fantasia more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it doesn't focus on Bambi at all. It just shows the forest, during a rainstorm and the creatures trying to take shelter. So really, it's kind of an unnecessary type scene in this movie. But again, it does show the forest, it shows the animals, and it shows, Bambi how he sees everything. Like, he's fascinated by the rain, but at the same time terrified by the lightning.
And I love what they did in the scene with the wind, where it's not actual wind, it's a chorus of voices doing it.
Yeah.
So that's, I think Little April Shower is one of the best songs in Bambi. It's more memorable than a lot of this stuff, especially because it sets a certain mood to it, and it's very entrancing. There are only really two other actual like songs, and then we're gonna get into the actual like music behind the film. But the next one is Let's Sing a Gay Little Spring Song, and that's basically the song for spring.
It's that song that everyone knows from the really weird transition scene.
La da da tweet
Tweet da la 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 la.
It's the song of spring, and it's the song of like when everyone's frolicking and having fun and mating, and the song where Owl pokes out his head and he's like, quiet, cut all that racket out of here. And it's I don't think it's really meant to be like a flagship song either. It's just kind of like,
it's more of a distraction from the horrible tragedy that just happened. It's like, quick, we can't have death. We can't have death killing the mood here. Quick, let's do something happy, something cheerful. La 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 la. Look at all the birdies. Look at all the birdies.
I do think though that it's also meant to be like, okay, even though Bambi's mother is dead, life continues. Like, she was Bambi's mother and he was Prince of the Forest, so this death is important, and yet stuff still happens. Time still goes by. So, yes, it is meant to distract you, but at the same time, I think it's meant to send the message that this forest continues on.
Yep. And to show animals getting it on.
And the last song section in the film is I Bring You a Song, and that's when Bambi and Faline are frolicking through the forest, and really, I don't remember much of this.
I believe it actually got nominated for an award though, for like best song. But
I think it's more because of the scene, really.
It's possible. Again, it's one of those scenes that you think that they probably cut out of Fantasia because they show more of nature than they actually do Bambi. And
in fact, the animation of the nature around this point keeps getting better. Where we've had in the beginning, we've had a lot of cuts, pans through the forest where we saw waterfalls in the background, but for the most part, it's static images of trees and stuff. But these, you can see the reeds moving and the grass moving.
It is very beautiful to look at, and the setup for the song. It's a bit more appropriate. I Bring You a Song, and of course, from the beginning, love is a song that never ends, so obviously it's supposed to be a love song. And it makes sense because this is when Bambi and Faline get together and are romping through the meadow. So, it's appropriate. In terms of a love song, it's kind of weird. Because I guess there are times where it seems like it's being romantic, but other times it's kind of eerie.
It's kind of a haunting melody where it's just like, is this supposed to be sad? Is this supposed to be happy? It's kind of both at the same time. It's very different. I don't think I would have put that as that song there at that point, really.
I personally would have switched them. Put I Bring You a Song at the beginning and then have Love is a Song during the meadow scene.
Yeah, that would have made more sense, especially because when we're still starting out, we don't know what's going on in the film. It's mysterious. We were like, what's this forest? Like, what's going on here? So I think that would have been so much better.
Yeah, and then the last song is basically just Love is a Song, just again at the end.
And so those are like the main flagship songs, if you will. For the most part, a lot of it is really understated, and the only one that's glaring is the one in the beginning. And then you have like Little April Shower, which is really good. That's probably my favorite of the film. But there's also a lot of stuff we can talk about with the music in the actual film is always present. It's like it's always kind of in constant song. It sets the mood for what is going on in the scene. I think one of the big accomplishments of this film is that, and that we saw in the commentary and we saw in the making of, is that when doing Pinocchio, they thought of the music after they did the animations, after they did the storyboards, and work with the scenes. But with this, they were constantly thinking of the music while they were doing everything, and it shows so much in that this music is a presence in this film. The music is a certain part of this film and has a certain life to it, as much as this forest has a certain life.
But even so, I think the music, as well as it meshes with the animation and the characters and everything, it's still a tad on the forgettable side.
I think that's the point, though. I don't think it's supposed to be like a flagship. Okay, I remember every bit of this. It's not supposed to be a Fantasia type piece. The music in this is supposed to celebrate a certain part of life, and for the most part, so there's some things in life you don't remember. There are things that it's just supposed to be a background tune to life, I think.
Right. And I guess that's the best you can hope for with this, because I don't expect any, like big stomping musical numbers.
I don't expect any, even like stuff in Tarzan, which, we disagree about Tarzan's musical score, but one thing I can say about that is it had a lot more presence to it than Bambi did, and Bambi didn't need that. Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, the music, good. A tad forgettable, but still, does what it's set out to do.
And Little April Shower, I want it. I want that song. Let's see. We talked about the characters. We talked about the music. Let's talk a little bit about the story.
Well, the story is pretty simple and straightforward. It's about the life of a deer.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it throughout the course of this podcast. It's just that Bambi is born. He wants to... He grows, he learns, and he wants to become pretty much the next prince. And so he's groomed to be this new prince. But really, that's not even what the film is about. The film is about, okay, he's observing life all around him. And a lot of these characters... like his father, are just sitting back and observing things that are going on in life and in the forest. And very much the forest setting is about life. There's so many things going on. There's so many animals and stuff that you meet going through the forest that you see. And then when someone else comes in, you definitely feel a different shift. When man is there, you see a shift in how everything is approached. So it's a film about life. It's a film about like observing how life is.
Yes, it definitely does show that, the whole sequence of life and how others view it and everything. So, and like I said, it actually is really simple, because everyone has experienced things like Bambi has at one point or another. So it doesn't have a driving plot like characters going to a certain place or trying to achieve a goal or something like that. So. It's not as exciting as other Disney movies, but it's still a nice story.
I think, to me, it's an experience akin to Fantasia. I call it the spiritual successor of Fantasia, in the fact that when you watch it, yes, it has a plot and whatnot, but it's really an experience viewing it. And so it's different than, say, something like Dumbo, where you just you can tell, this happened and this happened. There is a driving force behind everything that happens. Not really so in Bambi. And Bambi, while 10 minutes longer than Dumbo, it definitely feels like... It doesn't feel like that long. It doesn't feel like it's taking forever. There's no really... There's a really... scenes I would call padding. There's no really scenes that have no point. Everything is done its purpose to show what this film is about.
So, people with short attention spans who aren't deep thinkers would probably find this movie boring or really slow paced,
or maybe even childish. Some people would probably say, but I think that's what the film is trying to show. It's trying to show children. It's trying to show growing up. And not everyone will appreciate that.
Right. So it's obviously this, because in a lot of people, Bambi's not exactly on their top lists because for its lack of, driving story and
Driving villain. Well, man, but really.
Well, it's driving story, driving villain, and lack of, more developed characters. But it's still enjoyable to watch. It's still a great, kids film. It's still a great, animated film.
And it's a Disney classic. No doubt about that.
Absolutely.
Not that gay dragon. I'm going to find a way to work the reluctant dragon into every single episode of this podcast. You will see.
Until the next thing comes along to piss him off.
Yeah. But, yeah, so that was Bambi. I think we can agree that this is one of Disney's best films in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And while it isn't, like, the most plot-heavy, while it isn't, like, the most deep film, I definitely say that this is an experience worth checking out.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone who didn't grow up watching Bambi, just go out, rent it, watch it, and see it for yourself. It may not be your favorite, but you'll definitely, you'll probably enjoy this film.
And you can experience the trauma.
Bambi's mom.
No.
Next time we have Bambi 2. And I've heard good things about this film from everyone else who I've talked to on the forums and whatnot. They keep saying, "Oh, but Captain Picard is in this film, and it's actually pretty good as a midquel." I'll see for myself. I will see for myself. But one thing I just will note: this took place 64 years after the original aired, and is as such the longest time between two properties from an original film and its sequel. It has the world record for that.
Yep.
So it can be either the coolest thing in existence that, this is actually really good after all these years, or it could be the worst thing in existence. So we'll see next time.
Yes, next time.
But anyway, if you guys have any comments, criticisms, suggestions, or anything else for the podcast, please let us know at zenithrule.blip.tv. If you have a Discus or Twitter or Facebook or anything, you can sign in and leave a comment, and I read and respond to all the comments there. Also, if you don't feel like, commenting there, some people don't feel like it, just follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/zenithrule or twitter.com/EphraimTRabbit.
Yes.
And we will follow you guys back in return and, start up a conversation about Disney.
Yay.
But anyway, I am Zenith Rule, and this is my good friend, Cat Mac.
A.K.A. Ephraim T. Rabbit, a.k.a. Cat T. Critic.
And we will see you next time.
TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Thank you for watching The Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on The Media Meltdown.